Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Weather Savvy Roads Initiative. My name is Romer Alfalor. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration Road Weather Management Program. And today you're going to hear about the Weather Savvy Roads Initiative that we are trying to deploy as part of the EDC4 initiative. There is on each table there is a sign-in sheet. So if you could please fill in the sign-in sheet so we know who's in attendance. Okay, that sounds good. And I'm glad to hear a lot of people interested in road weather management, road weather information system, because I'm going to talk a little bit about it and what we're doing in the program as it relates to the Weather Savvy Roads initiative. So this is our agenda for this session. We just finished the introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about, provide an overview about the road weather management problem, how it affects the transportation system at the national level. And then we're going to go into the details of what we mean by Pathfinder, Weather Savvy Roads. There are two solutions that we're trying to advance as part of the initiative. So we're going to be hearing about those two initiatives. And then I'm going to summarize with some closing remarks. So there's only going to be two presenters today. I'm going to tag team with Rod Schilling, who's, you heard, he's with the Nevada DOT. And there are other members involved in the Weather Savvy Roads Initiative. They're listed here. I'm going to talk about them later as, when I identify who's in the Weather Savvy Roads implementation team. So first, I want to just let you know what the difference is between weather and road weather, because there is a big difference. When we talk about weather, we're just talking about what is the state of the atmosphere. Whereas when we talk about road weather, we're talking about what the state of the driving environment. So there are two different concepts. In terms of how they affect the people, the public, weather just affects how it's gonna, what clothes we're gonna wear, or how it's going to impact our use of power, electricity, as well as the type of activities that we can do during different weather conditions. Whereas road weather, it affects us in a different way in that it can tell us whether we can use the roads, which roads are closed. It tells us whether we need to reduce our speeds based on the conditions. And in terms of the message that is being conveyed, on the weather side, it's actually pretty broad and generalized, and it applies to the entire public. Whereas for the road weather, it's specific to the impacts of the weather on the road conditions. So that just gives you the distinction between weather and road weather. And what we're focusing on in the road weather management program at Federal Highways is the road weather. So this chart shows you the 10-year annual average of fatalities under adverse weather conditions. You can see here the total, the red bar, you have 607 fatalities that is associated with different weather conditions. So, and this information, or this number of fatalities, is being tracked by the National Weather Service. On the other hand, if you look on the far right, where you have the blue chart, the blue bar, you have about 5,645 fatalities that every year that occur on the roads. So as you can see, there's a big discrepancy in terms of the fatalities that occur as a result of just the weather events and fatalities that take place on the highways. In terms of the total crashes, so now this includes not just fatalities, but crashes that result in injuries and property damages. There is about 5.7 million crashes that occur on the highways every year. And this pie chart shows you that of all those crashes, 22% are related to adverse weather. And this if you know, we don't drive under severe weather conditions most of the time, 22% of the time. In fact, we only drive under adverse weather conditions about 7 to 8% of the time. So you can see there is an over-representation of crashes that are related to adverse weather. And that's why at the Road Weather Management Program at FHWA, we're trying to address this problem. And if we break up all the weather-related crashes based on the type of conditions, you can see that the wet pavement contributes about 70%. The cause of the accident, wet pavement contributes about 70% of that cost. And then icy pavement, 13%, snow slushy pavement, 15%, and then fog or low visibility, about 2%. And of course, I mean, the frequency of the weather events also vary, so you probably also need to normalize this based on the frequency of rain or ice or snow events. So road weather doesn't only affect the safety of the transportation system. As you can see, there is a significant impact on the number of crashes, number of fatalities. It also significantly impacts the mobility of the transportation system. About a quarter of all delays that occur on the highways, those delays are not due to the high traffic volume, are caused by adverse weather. And in terms of the costs associated with that congestion that results from the delays, they amount to about $9.5 billion a year for the 85 urban areas in the country. In terms of productivity, which the freight transportation is impacted by weather delays also significantly in the amount of about $3.4 billion a year. And finally, the environment. Weather impacts the environment because the agencies have to use chemicals, salt and other chemicals during the winter season. And that impacts the watersheds, the salinity of the watersheds, as well as the air quality and the infrastructure, where you have the use of the chemicals can cause corrosion on the infrastructure facilities. So I said earlier that the message that you need to communicate to the travelers about road weather need to be focused on what the impacts are. And impacts are not just the weather event itself. So when we talk about impacts, it includes, okay, what type of weather event is going to take place? Is it going to be snow? It's going to be wind? But in addition to that, the travelers, the public also need to know when the weather event is going to take place and how long it's going to be. So there is a difference between, for example, a snow event that takes place at early morning as opposed to a snow event that takes place during rush hour. So the impacts are going to be a lot different. The other impact that the travelers need to know are how the weather event is going to impact the condition of the roads in terms of the roughness or the friction, the surface friction, or how much snow is going to accumulate on the road surface. And also what the agency is doing about it, whether they're going to be performing some winter maintenance actions to improve the condition of the roads. And finally, on the traffic side, the travelers need to know whether it's going to impact the traffic conditions in terms of the speeds, in terms of the delays, things like that. So impact is not just about weather. There are other information that you need to convey to the public and the travelers. So as I said earlier, as part of the Weather Savvy Roads initiative, we are trying to advance two solutions. One is Pathfinder, and the other is integrating mobile observations. Of course, there are other solutions that we're trying to, or other research development and deployment activities that we're doing in the road weather management program But as part of the EDC4, these are the two solutions that we think are going to benefit the transportation agencies in the near future. So we're going to talk about each of them. First, the Pathfinder. What is Pathfinder? Well, it is actually just a process to help strengthen the relationships between the state DOTs and the weather and climate enterprise, so that they can disseminate road weather information to the travelers that is clear, concise, impact-based, and consistent. So the impacts, the ones that I talked about earlier. And the ultimate goal is so that the drivers are not only well-informed, but they are also have the ability to make safe and efficient travel decisions. So that is the goal of the Pathfinder initiative. In order to communicate the right information, impact message to the travelers, you need the following core partners for the Pathfinder process. This includes the National Weather Service, because they are experts at weather forecasts. You also need, if the agency has a private sector weather provider, you also need to engage them in the process, because they are experts at making road weather forecasts. So again, there's a difference between just the weather forecast and then the road weather forecasts. And finally, the state DOTs themselves, because they are the experts at operating and maintaining the roadways. They know what they need to do when certain weather conditions exist on the road. And they also are knowledgeable about what the impact of the weather conditions are to the traveling public. And in many cases where you have high impact events, the state emergency managers of the agency need to be engaged in the collaboration process. Okay, I want to get an idea from those here. I think we got all states represented. But you may not know the answer to this question. If you do, please respond. If you don't, then it's okay. If you do respond to the poll question. The first one, do you know if your agency communicates with the National Weather Service during weather events? And if they do you communicate always? Only during major events, or you never communicate with the National Weather Service? Can we have the responses from the state DOTs? I'm sorry. Connecticut, always? Only during major events? Always, okay. Any other agency?
Maine as well. In fact, our two weather service, National Weather Service, Gray and Caribou, have set up self-briefings. So they read a briefing, and you can just go on the line and see it any time. You can call them, if you have questions, communicate. So you always more in major ones, but we're always in there. It's usually a self-serving communication.
New Hampshire?
I'm speaking for New Hampshire because I used to work for New Hampshire DOT. The traffic management system that is used by the 3 states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont have a module built into it that automatically integrates National Weather Service watches and warnings into the system. So when it comes in as an alert, then the operators can actually look at it and determine what level of response that they need to do. And so the determination was to integrate with National Weather Service because of the watch and warning, not advisories, but watch and warning concept.
And that probably answers the next question, but we're going to go there later.
You have the answer for at least the 3 states on the contract. You do the same.
Thanks. New York State, do you know?
In New York, we will have conference calls with the National Weather Service during our major incidents. In the winter, a major weather event is pretty much every snowstorm.
Right.
So we communicate with them.
So you consider all snowstorms major events? Rhode Island?
Oh, with the state of Rhode Island, with my position now, that we will be probably issuing at least once a day forecasts. Then those forecasts will be more detailed when events take place. In the meantime, we do have a pathway with FHWA as well, briefings and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it'll be a more detailed kind of forecast that will be going on a daily basis, and it'll be released to all the departments within the state that need that information.
So you're always doing it?
Always.
Always.
Yes.
The other states, Massachusetts?
At the beginning of the summer, so I don't know.
I can speak to Massachusetts. I worked there for 38 years. For the large events, they have statewide conference calls with the National Weather Service as a routine. But they also have a hired service that uses National Weather Service information as part of their analysis, because they break the state down with the private service, so yes, and then they, on a daily basis, they take with the National Weather Service, the private contractor takes the National Weather Service information and incorporates that into what their predictions are as well.
So the answer is always, we probably should ask the second question as part of that as well, because some of them are already telling us how they do that, the communication. But anyway, there's another state that we haven't heard from, right? We have Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Oh, we got everyone. Okay. Good. Next question, what type of communication do you use? And here you can have one or more of the choices. So let's start with Rhode Island.
Rhode Island will be getting a daily email with the forecast, and also we tie in with briefings when there are severe events going on with NWS, and that also goes across to EMA as well.
Okay. So you get a
Daily email at least once a day.
Okay.
And you do both communications two-way?
Yes.
Do you get a formal briefing from them?
From NWS?
Yeah.
And when their events are, critical, we will tie into the briefings.
So you do all three of them? Next, New Hampshire.
For New Hampshire, when it comes to weather, the National Weather Service is the alerts are integrated, but there is a daily, they have a private service, a private contracting service with DTN that sends out daily forecasts to everybody within the department. There's a meteorologist on staff that the operators can actually email and text back and forth to get 15-minute updates. So from a daily basis, it's really a private service. But when you get into the major events, that's when the actual one-on-one communication with the National Weather Service and briefings takes place.
So it depends on what
It depends on the type of event coming in. As it gets to be more of a major event, then you get into the briefing and that type of functionality. But day-to-day, it's a private contracted service we use.
So probably during high-impact events, you get not just daily, but also maybe hourly, or that makes sense. New York, do you know?
We're very similar on a day-to-day basis. At least we used to get an email from a private contractor. I believe that contract expired, so I don't know where we are with that at this moment, but I know that we'll be looking to renew with somebody sometime. But as the event gets more and more serious, we get closer and closer with the National Weather Service.
Yeah.
And we'll get email briefings, and then we'll actually have the phone calls. So we do all three.
Maine?
All three with the National Weather Service, very similar to them. Day-to-day, informal communication, self-help, and then on a major event, there are phone calls with MEMA and other emergency response agencies and other agencies. So, yeah, all three.
Massachusetts?
I was there several years ago. We got the weather twice a day to the operations center and to each district office. If there was any questions with the weather, it would be an email exchange with the contractor who was in part using National Weather Service information. And then there would be conversations, based on the districts as necessary. If the snow and ice engineers or from my perspective, the operations center had any questions, we would be able to call, talk to the service, and not necessarily the National Weather Service directly, but except for the big ones. The big ones, we would be in touch with them.
Okay, Connecticut?
It's pretty much similar.
Similar.
We have a private provider that we use on a daily basis, and for big events, we exchange back and forth with the National Weather Service.
Okay. So I think we can say, you just said that you have a private weather service provider, right, for Connecticut? And the same with Massachusetts? Do you have a... Okay. And Maine, you don't have it, okay.
We've built such a strong relationship with the National Weather Service, and they're beginning to really understand road weather as well as atmospheric weather, and it just seems to work really well for us right now.
So you do your own road weather forecasting?
With help from the National Weather Service, from actual purposes. We seem to be getting more and more into that.
And I heard you said that New York State you think there is a private weather service?
I know we used to, I'm not sure where we stand with it at this point, so.
And New Hampshire, also you have a weather service provider, and you are the weather service. Yeah, so it looks like for all the states in this region, I think you have a good relationship with your National Weather Service, and you have like a regular communication, and it gets more frequent during high-impact events. So that's good. I think probably if we're going to characterize your the level of coordination with the National Weather Service, you are implementing them, but it's probably more not institutionalized. I think some of you probably still need to build that relationship, but it's at a good stage. Because I'm going to talk a little bit about what Pathfinder is, what the different stages are. So that's good. Thanks for your input. I think it's going to help us because as part of the initiative, we need to sort of identify what stages the different state DOTs are in terms of implementing the weather savvy roads solutions. Oh, Vermont, yeah, forgot.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Vermont.
Vermont's similar. We do all three, but it's like during a specific, like a major weather event. And
Right.
we're gonna obviously have a lot more like hourly type communication. But I think we're in the same vein as the other states.
And you have a private weather provider?
Do you have a,
I don't think we have a private, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Josh,
Yeah, go ahead.
not that I know your state, but
Well, no, you do.
you guys, they're very different because they also use academia. They use Linden State University
Yeah.
to provide forecasts, which is unusual in terms of the rest of the states. So that they use the university for helping to forecast.
so your private weather service provider is
Through Linden State College, yeah.
I think in some states on the west, I think they do that. I think the Western Transportation Institute provides some of the forecasting for Montana, right? And some of the western states. What is their system called? WeatherNet? Is it? I forgot. But some states out west, they use the universities as the source of weather information and forecasts. So, does any of the state here have a resident or on-site meteorologist? I know you're not on-site, right, at the Rhode Island DOT. You are on-site. Okay, so Rhode Island has an on-site meteorologist. Any other state that has? No? Okay. And that's why in the road weather management program, we have a number of training courses on road weather management, tailored for the transportation agencies who are not experts at road weather forecasting. So they have a little bit of information about meteorology and some of the basic terms that they need to know about weather forecasting. All right, I think that's the end of our poll questions. Thanks for your input. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the impacts now. So I told you earlier that the impact is not just the weather event, there are other information that the travelers need to know. Here is an excerpt from the Washington Post article that last year that came out the day after a major snowstorm. And basically the snowstorm caused a lot of problem in the morning commute. And what the what the article is saying is the right forecast was made in terms of, okay, that the snow was gonna come, and then in terms of what time it's gonna be there. But somehow the right impact message was not communicated to the travelers. So still a lot of people treated it as a normal day, and they went to work, and so that's where all the problems happened, because there was a lot of congestion, and so it's sort of like a gridlock that took place as part of that weather event. So in this particular case, I think there was a problem in not communicating the right impact message to the travelers. And as I said earlier, this information should include not just the timing, location, or duration of the weather event. They also need to know how the weather is going to impact the road conditions. So if they need to assume that since it's going to happen during rush hour, then the speeds are going to be reduced. And so the travelers need to know that maybe they need to adjust their departure times in order to reduce the congestion and not to experience the delays. They also need to know if the agency is doing anything in order to address the weather problem. So I also want to point out that in terms of communicating the impacts of road weather, it is not the responsibility of the National Weather Service to communicate that impact to the travelers. It is the responsibility of the state DOT, the transportation agency, to convey that information to the travelers. So in this particular case, I think it's probably the fault of the District of Columbia DOT for not communicating the right information to the travelers. I'm going to show you a short video clip of a pileup that took place last year in Wyoming. Now this took place, I think, early spring on I-80, Interstate I-80 between Cheyenne and Laramie. So for those of you who traveled that route, there's a lot of truck traffic that use that road. It's an east-west corridor for truck traffic. It's not just so for this particular blizzard condition, it's the visibility that was severely impacted, but they also have a lot of wind, high wind events. And in those cases, in those instances, they also close. That's a criterion for closing the interstate when you have high winds. And I think they have done a lot in terms of providing traveler information to the public, especially the truck traffic. They have an application that the commercial vehicle travelers can check about the road conditions and how it's going to impact, the weather condition, how it's going to impact the roads. But still, I think because of it's a rural location, and then you have a lot of trucks, it's a prescription for disaster. So. And what Pathfinder aims to do is to make sure that information that comes from different sources are consistent. Because in many cases, you get the different message from the National Weather Service, you get the different message from the DOT. So the public is kind of confused, and the travelers aren't sure what the right information is. So that's what the Pathfinder process aims to achieve.
But like Wyoming, a lot of states, what the atmospheric weather is, it all relates, but there are times when there is no atmospheric event and there is an event, whether it's wind, that's an atmospheric event, but depending on what the snow's like, what the drifting is and refreezing is, and road temperatures, and have a humid morning and you get a refreeze, we call it pulling frost, but it's really not it's an atmospheric thing, but it's not something the public would realize is an atmospheric thing. And those are a lot of times where you have issues like this, because the public's watching the weather and it's a beautiful bright morning, but it's
humid and it's, temperature dropping below zero, so you pull frost out of the, pull moisture out of the air and pull frost onto the
Yeah.
surface, so.
No, and I've heard of some black ice incidents there as well. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, in this particular event, the variable speed limits were activated, so they reduced it. So can you just imagine if they didn't have the variable speed limit? So, and I think it's also good to know like location-specific road weather conditions, and that's what the IMO initiative is going to solve or try to solve. So basically, for this particular weather event, the public needs to know that there is a blizzard condition, how it's going to impact the visibility in terms of the sight distance or the traction, especially for the heavy vehicles, the trucks, how it's going to impact the safe speeds, and also what the agency is doing about it. And that's why we have update virus protection. I hope this is not infected. So this is why the Federal Highway Administration started or began working with the state DOT or the state DOT partners, as well as the National Weather Service. We started about 2 or 3 years ago with the Pathfinder initiative. And since then, we have worked with a number of state DOTs to develop a document shown here, which provides guidance to agencies on how they can collaborate with the partners, the National Weather Service, with the state, the private sector weather providers, in order to convey the right information to the travelers. And I know that most of you already have that relationship in place, so you just need to maybe formalize it in order to make it more effective. So the document, actually, I have 3 copies each of this document, the Pathfinder. If you can pass this around, don't take them because I already used for the other summits too. But so we have the Pathfinder document, which describes the 8 basic steps that agencies can take in order to improve their collaboration with their partners during weather events. It provides examples of from the state DOTs that have already implemented Pathfinder. And as I heard here today, each agency is different in terms of how you're structured. Some of you have, yes, Denise?
When you say each agency is different, one thing to note is last year, the 6 New England states got together and created a set of message sets for the dynamic message boards related to weather. Right. And the idea was that storms don't stop at the borders, and so the idea is that Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Maine, as these storms started moving, whether it was weather conditions or forecasting, they were putting the same message on the boards. So that was one attempt to try and do some sort of a standard process relative to weather.
No, that makes sense because weather knows no boundaries, so you have to collaborate not just within the state, but also across state boundaries. But the question is, when you develop those message sets, was the Weather Service engaged in that process, or did they?
No. I mean, obviously, we would take if there's a National Weather Service advisory warning out or a watch. There are message sets in there that would say that because there's a forecasting component and there's an actual storm component as far as field condition messaging. And the idea was to use some of the national. I mean, there's certain if it's a tornado watch or if it's a severe flooding, we would use the National Weather Service language in some cases. Vermont doesn't, but Massachusetts, for example, or Maine would do that. So that was part of the discussion. But one important point to note about those messages is that there was a lot of discussion on the intensity of the message. When you come in and you want to say black ice possible, use caution or be aware was kind of what we called Casper milquetoast. Really, you need to say slow down.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of discussion about, are we being too in the face of the public. No, if it's a safety issue and if your road conditions are getting to that point, you need to tell the public to slow down. And so that was a lot of discussion in all of the field. I think Dale can, I know you're shaking your head, Cliff was very involved with doing that.
And they pointed at, this really not there are pieces of the National Weather Service messaging, but they're really the road weather portion of it, right? It's road flooded or things like that, so it's road oriented, not atmosphere.
No, but it's good to know that you made sure that the messages that you have in the message is consistent with the National Weather Service messages, especially the ones that pertain to more atmospheric type of information.
They provide all kinds of services to a lot of the New England states, like us. We do all our new snowfighters go through Wise College. We call it Wise College. It's a week of training, or 3/4 a week of training, and National Weather Service actually comes in and does a session so that even our snowfighters, frontline snowfighters, can understand what they're talking about. So we train right down to the bottom, and I think some of our neighbor states do very similar things.
That's good to know. So there are several, it's not just coordination within the state, but across state boundaries. I think it's very important. And one of the documents that are being passed around is the workbook. It's actually sort of a tool that the agency can use in order to implement the Pathfinder. So there's the guidance document, and then there's a workbook. When you decide that you want to do Pathfinder, you can actually use the workbook to guide you through the process. There are some questions that you can fill out in order to determine, for example, what type of information you need, who are the partners that you need to engage with during the weather events.
Are these documents available on Federal Highways EDC website?
Not yet. This one, the workbook, we're not going to, I think the intent is not to make it public through the website, but the guidance document, that one is I think it's in the process of being posted on the road weather management, FHWA website, but then eventually we're going to put it as in the EDC4 website.
So for the workbook, if a DOT has chosen this as an innovation workbook, that'll be made available?
Yes, yeah, we're going to make it available to the agency that decides to implement the Pathfinder. So as I said earlier, in developing the guidance document, we work with a number of states that have already implemented the process, and these are the states that have already done so. They have 5 states which are in different levels, stages of implementation. And last month, in October, we started talking to Colorado DOT because they also are interested in strengthening their working relationships with their partners. So we're going to add Colorado DOT in that group soon. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. This next slide is a good segue for the. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Utah DOT experience. They're one of the states that early implementers of Pathfinder. And I wish that Jeff Williams was here because he's the spokesperson for the UDOT in terms of their experience with the Pathfinder. But basically, for Utah, they experience a lot of weather events, and they're pretty proactive about it. I mean, they have a lot of systems in place to help inform the travelers about weather events. They have traffic management strategies that they implement during those weather events. But their decision to go ahead with the Pathfinder is motivated by several factors. First, they want to make sure that the public is using the road weather messages to make the right travel decisions. They also want to be able to synchronize the media and the weather outlets on the impact message that is communicated. They also want to reduce congestion and increase the maintenance effectiveness, the snowplow effectiveness, and promote safety. And they want to make sure that they have the public's trust when it comes to their traveler information systems, which again, as I said, they use to convey the information, road weather information. And finally, they want to be able to promote integration, data sharing across the agencies within the DOT and with the other partners. And the partners that they have involved in the process include they have 2 forecast offices, National Weather Service forecast offices in Salt Lake City and Grand Junction. By the way, Utah DOT, they have a resident or on-site meteorologist, so they're there 24 hours, even during the summer season. So they have the on-site meteorologist there to provide support to the TMC. The other partners, of course, the UDOT, folks themselves, and then the communications division during the high-impact events. And as I said, Utah experiences a lot of road weather events, but for this particular, for the Pathfinder process, they just want to focus on the events that have a high impact on their system. That includes the snow, freezing rain, and high winds. And their traveler information systems are their means to convey that information. They have a lot of systems that they use to inform the travelers. They have the variable message signs, they have road weather alerts, they have a TravelWise, 511, they provide TV interviews. And then on the National Weather side, National Weather Service side, it's the watches and warnings and the weather stories that come from the National Weather Service. So, to answer your question, who asked about what you did. So the types of, the results that they have achieved by implementing Pathfinder is very, very positive. It's actually very, very encouraging. They were able to provide unified and well-forecasted messages to the public. They found a significant reduction in their vehicle miles traveled during snow events, which means that the public is actually responding to the message that they communicate. And they did a survey to sort of determine the impact that the messages have on the travelers. And they found out that in general, the public is more likely to change their travel plans. And they found out that the travelers said they either changed their schedules, they changed their routes, or they did not make the trip at all, or in some cases they use mass transit, alternative modes of transportation. So the response that they were hoping to achieve with the Pathfinder, they were able to achieve those responses. And with the Pathfinder, they also realized that the trust, or at least know that the trust is built among the public because all the sources are communicating the same information. In terms of their maintenance staff, they found out that their snow plowing operations are more effective and the congestion on the roads are less. So overall, it's a very positive experience that Utah DOT had with implementing Pathfinder. I think that's all I have in terms of the Pathfinder solution, and I have a couple of questions here to sort of steer up some discussion. But first of all, does anybody have any question about Pathfinder or the information that I provided? If not, then I think it would help me to know your answers to the following questions. What practices do you have in your agency that you think can help you deploy the Pathfinder solution? I think the answer to this we've heard already. So you have the the relationships in place with the National Weather Service. But are there any other practices that you think you have currently underway or implementing that can help you deploy the Pathfinder solution?
I think we talked about it, I think many of us are doing pieces of what Utah's doing, not all of it, but every state's got a little piece here and there, right? You know, we have message signs we're using, we have messages we constructed in the Northeast, we have 511 system online, we have a lot of those things, but maybe not quite to the intensity of.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is you have different traveler information systems in place that will help you convey the information to the public, to travelers.
Some, not to the extent you have that.
Yeah, maybe you don't have the variable speed limit signs. I mean, so yes.
I may have missed it because I've had some emails, but how does the media play into the Pathfinder? Media is a big piece of this.
Yeah. The media actually, especially during high-impact events, they, in many states, they actually talk to the TMCs, or they also participate in the briefings.
I know that, yeah, that in Massachusetts that was a routine.
Yeah.
But what we found in Massachusetts was that they don't give them information, what you want them to say, to make it up, doing it sometimes. So, they're behind the whole process there.
I think for the Pathfinder process, the media is treated like the public. So whatever is conveyed to the public is actually also conveyed to the media. So they're not part of the coordination process because we don't want the media to influence what type of information is conveyed to the travelers, because I think that's they're not, because they have.
Well, it's for the traffic reporters, those people that, that many of the TMCs work with every day, that can play a valuable role in relaying information that you want relayed, not something that they are interpreting and making up.
So you're talking about like the public information officers for the state TOT, because they're the ones.
Information reporters is every major city has reporters that just deal with traffic.
I think you're right. I think in the void, something will fill the void, and we're fortunate in Maine with our broadcast media. They're very proactive too. They see a National Weather Service event, then the weather team will sometimes 2 or 3 days call us and say, "What are you doing to prepare for the storm?" And it's always the same, but they always broadcast it, and that's just a good chance to give a little message. It's also a chance to get out ahead and talk a little bit about non-essential travel and encourage people. And in a couple events, we've even had our governor write a statement to our POI officer, but we'll have them, sometimes we'll have them interview plow truck drivers, because plow truck driver, what can you do for me? Well, if you get off the road, you can help, and so I think absolutely, the more you feed them, the more you can get your message out, especially if you do it proactively. Otherwise, a message is going out,
Exactly.
better yours than somebody else's.
Right, exactly.
And if they're actually out there observing road weather conditions, they can be a source of information as well that the agency can use. Or the other question is, what barriers exist in your agency? Are there any barriers that you see might prevent you from implementing Pathfinder, from collaborating with the partners? I think it's a very trivial, not trivial, but it's an easy process, because in most cases, in this age, most states, that relationship again is already in place. So just need to strengthen.
It's not a barrier, again, it's just the one thing that I guess has always been, at least for Maine and maybe just for other places, it's how you construct your message, when you use the message, and how frequently you use the message. And it's not an internal barrier, except that. So the barrier in Maine is whether it's the state police or whether it's our crew supervisors currently using our dynamic speed signs, but in the future, every one of those will be replaced with a small dynamic message sign on the interstate corridor. So every exit will have one, which, for Maine, that's a big deal. Other places it's not, but it's how you use those. Our dynamic speed signs have become ineffective over the years because every time a snowflake falls, that's a little exaggeration, but often anytime there's a weather event, they go on. And then you have unpredictable black ice and you turn them on and people see dark pavement and that doesn't catch their attention and you see things like we saw today. So I think one of the barriers is before you deploy a technology, really make sure you have the protocols in place to deploy it and deploy it so it stays effective. You know, if your dynamic message signs are always doing public service announcements, when you have something you really want to put on there, people don't see it, right? So I think that's one of our barriers, is just getting the policies before we deploy the technology, make sure we're really sure what message we want to deliver. And
Well, I think also that if you post on your VMS signs, even if you don't do the PSAs and that kind of thing, if you post every time a snowflake is going to fall that there's going to be bad roads, people are going to stop believing you.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, I'm driving on the roads are fine.
Right.
So there's really a balance you have to
then you get the one bad one that's unpredictable and people just,
Right.
it looks great, you know?
Right, then all of
And
a
I think
sudden
that's
they
a lot of,
scream.
like the thing we saw on the video earlier, that happens in Maine because of that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
No, I think that's, I think you have to make sure that you post the messages at the right time, and the right, when you turn it off is also something that you need to make sure is right so that the public can trust you, will trust you. Any other barriers that you can see?
I don't know if this is a barrier, but it's a fun story.
Oh, okay. I'd like to hear that.
So in Boston, we, should I sing this? So in Boston, so we had good information, similar to the DC story where everyone went to work, and then we had a call with the National Weather Service and the day before, and we had told people basically to leave, you should really leave by noontime. Well, those snow started to come just a little early, and everyone left at noontime to go home, and it gridlocked the city.
Right.
And then you gridlock the city, you can't treat the roadway, so tractor trailers can't get up to even slight inclines. So, what was one of the similar to that disaster?
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
one of the worst disasters we had in Boston, and it was the whole metropolitan area. A half-hour commute took 8 hours, that sort of thing. It's all because everyone left at the same exact time, so after that, they learned to space it out and to try to advise, government employees, you leave here, private, they tried to space it out a little bit. So just
Yeah, the timing of when you're
Timing,
gonna, yeah, it's
yeah.
very, very important.
Right.
I think in DC it also happened. I think there was one event where you had the very thin ice on the highway, and then they did not announce it early enough to the travelers, and so when it happened in the afternoon, that's where everybody was going home. So it just caused gridlock.
Well, as you know, black ice sneaks up on you.
Yeah, even how-
You
even,
know,
very,
there can
very
be
thin.
black ice like
Yeah.
that, and then so you really don't know it's coming a lot of times. So it's fun.
Good story.
I can. The other solution as part of the Weather Savvy Roads is the integrating mobile observations. Again, my name's Rod Schilling. I'm the Assistant Chief Traffic Operations Engineer for the Nevada Department of Transportation. I was the project lead for the third phase of our integrated mobile observations project. Some of the things that we want to look at is the goal for integrated mobile observations. We wanted to be able to deploy advanced vehicle-based technologies, collect this data, transmit it, and then use this weather and road condition information related to the vehicle data for improved transportation system management. Before we move on, though, I'd like to do the same thing. We'll do some poll questions here. So I want to ask everybody out there, what percentage of your agency maintenance vehicles are instrumented with external weather sensors? I guess we can start back in that corner again.
Yeah. Let's start with
You want to start, you've got a whole list there?
New York, I think the answer is 0. Actually, no, that's not right. They have recently, they're doing a pilot project, I think, to
Yeah.
instrument a few vehicles.
Rick McDonald.
So it's only a handful, but for the most part, it's not something that we do other than outside this.
In fact, we were trying to get a snowplow here, with instrumented snowplow. From Rick McDonald.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I think we
unfortunately-
outfitted a couple of our service patrol trucks, or one or two.
Yeah. So, yeah, you have, but you don't know what
Hand-
percentage.
No, it's just a handful.
But fair enough, and Massachusetts?
I'm not, I don't know.
You don't know?
I think they were playing with it when I was there, so I think they probably have some, but I don't know. 95% of their plows are contractors.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know, or it was, speaking 7 years ago. So I don't know. There was some instrumentation with, with deploying the mix, but I,
But you don't know whether they're weather sensors.
no, I don't know if there's weather sensors.
How about Connecticut?
We have air and ground temperature sensors. They don't transmit, but we're probably at 60 or 70% of the vehicles equipped with that. And we also have one mobile RWIS unit that we're experimenting with.
Is that left?
Yes. And we had it on a service patrol vehicle, and we're going to transfer it onto a snow fighting vehicle come this winter. But that transmits, I don't want to say real time, but it's certainly more often than every 20 minutes. Sure.
New Hampshire.
Yeah, we don't have any really the RWIS data traveling. We are just starting to do a program where we're equipping some of the vehicles for tracking where they are.
So ABL?
The AVLs, yeah. And most of those are the night riders and then some of the plow trucks.
So ABL, but no, hold on. Rhode Island?
We don't have any weather instrumentation on the trucks. I know we track the vehicles, not the private vendors, but we also have pucks in the ground or different locations that report back.
The fixed station.
Yes, it's the air temperature, road temperature, that kind of stuff. Some of the major bridges have that as well.
How about Maine?
Nearly all of them have road and air and road temperature sensors, and most of the supervisory do. The only transmission is via radio, and the supervisors come on very clear. Periodically during the day, they report weather, road conditions, but there's no.
That's okay, I mean, we're only asking whether the instrument.
Yeah, just the temperature. And
So approximately 100%?
Yeah, pretty close to 100% road.
And Vermont?
Yeah, I don't know if our trucks have like air and road temperatures on them. I know that we have some pickups that are equipped with mobile RWIS. We've been using those for a couple of years now. We do have ABL. I just don't know about those other sensors.
Okay.
Did you get that? Okay, the second one, does your agency transmit these observations near real time within, say, 20 minutes of the collection from those vehicles?
And I think somebody talked that we think maybe they're being transmitted within 20 minutes. Is that-
The mobile RWIS unit transmits
Okay.
also in real time. The other temperature sensors do not transmit at all.
Oh. How about Maine?
We don't transmit anything electronic.
No, okay.
No mobile stuff, anyway. Question was mobile, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Vermont, do you know?
Mobile RWIS, they do transmit. I don't know how frequently. I think it's more frequently than every 20 minutes, though. From my
Oh, more than
understanding.
20 minutes?
Pardon? Yeah, more frequently than every 20 minutes.
Or more?
So less than.
Less than, yeah.
Okay, and then the final one, which management strategies with these observations do you guys support? So like maintenance decision support, material management support, traveler information, or anything other than that?
Do you know if any of your data, mobile data from your maintenance vehicles are used to support any of these strategies? Maintenance, is it used for maintenance, decision making, for maintenance? Vermont?
Yes.
Yes? How about Connecticut?
For maintenance.
Was Vermont doing also material management on that side of it too?
You do material management too? Like for tracking usage
How much is
of
being
snow
dispensed?
and, do you know New York or,
I don't know.
no?
No, I think the RWIS that they have well, the stuff they recently installed on the trucks is likely for maintenance decision support. I don't think we're planning on using it for anything else.
So I'll put New York maintenance question.
Right.
All right.
But you can kind of see then, I guess we're kind of some mixed matched throughout the states here. You got some of them that looks like you're kind of going into a somewhat of an institutionalized, but some, you know, just very early in the deployments, looks like, so.
So none of you have instrumented vehicles are using the data for travel information for traffic control. That's, I think most states, I think, are in the same situation. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, what we're talking about in the IMO project, what we wanted to do is, one of the goals is just get the feasibility of collecting this data to improve the transportation safety and mobility. You know, some of the better things that we wanted to do and objectives was to make sure, you know, that we captured this data and was able to take it and then process this data for internal and external as well. So the intrusive, you know, the canvas data, and then the external data that you can use with the weather sensors that are on there too. You can look at the 3 states that were chosen here. We worked with the Federal Highway Administration pursuing this project, so that was Minnesota, Michigan, and Nevada DOT. You got varying numbers of vehicles that were fitted. Minnesota's got a pretty comprehensive fleet. Michigan DOT with 310 of their snow plows, 15 with the IMO. Nevada DOT, our snow vehicle was very small in nature. We have 60 currently fitted. Some of the data sets that you can look at all 3 of the states with the external weather sensors are pretty much the same across the board. And then you also have some of the onboard diagnostics that they're using, the brake status, wiper status, and that kind of thing. We're doing the same thing. And then you also have the material management side of it too. Some of them, you know, with conveyor belt and what's going to be listed on there. Some of the communication modes that are being used throughout the 3 states. You've got your cellular, your DSRC, Wi-Fi, radio communication. That's one of the systems that we use. It's a legacy system, the 800 megahertz. And then also some of the additional features some of the states are using is imagery and the AVL as well. And I wanted to make sure too, you know, as we're doing this, we've been working with the Federal Highway Administration, you know, from the start of this project, and we're into our 3rd phase as we're doing this. Some of the data collected and everything else, like we were talking about the intrusive side of the canvas, we found some difficulties as we moved through that, especially on Nevada DOT, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as we move into that. And so with the Nevada DOT's IMO system, we started about 5 years ago into this with the Federal Highway Administration, a collaborative effort with US DOT's FHWA, National Center of Atmospheric Research, the University of Nevada, Reno. We utilize them in all 3 phases, in addition to the Michigan DOT and Minnesota DOT. One of the big things that we wanted to do for the benefits as we move forward with this is to make sure that we had a modular architecture. We wanted to make sure that we moved into this final phase as we're transitioning away from the university, that the DOT is going to take ownership of this, and we achieved that. And so to do that too, we wanted to make sure that we had the multimodal capabilities for all 3 of these platforms. So we have the cellular platform, the DSRC, and the radio. So in the first phase we installed it was with our legacy system, the 800 megahertz. And then we wanted to go into the second phase. We wanted to get more of a shot at the cellular, and then we used where we had better saturation with that, and that was with an Android platform. There were some difficulties as we moved through that phase, and then in this final phase, one of the biggest benefits is like they discussed yesterday in the general session, is bringing in the IT department. That's what helped us probably the most in ours. We wanted to make sure that when we transition, that we have the capability for all three modes of communication, that we can retrofit back to any of these legacy systems, and then also to use a data exchange. So we developed that using the Traffic Management Data Dictionary. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure as we did that too is to make sure that we're compliant with the NTCIP 1204 section of the Environmental Station Centers, and then also with the auto industry with the SAE J2735. So these message sets that we made sure that they followed that compliance. And then we also wanted to make sure as we apply this that it's also going through our data exchange to the weather data environment, MADIS, the NCAR with the vehicle data translator, and then other providers like your traveler information and then the freight industry. So it was very beneficial for us to do that. We're working into our final phase right now where we're going to transition from the university and then where NDOT will take ownership of this. We transitioned into our server at this time, and then we want to take it into the next phase, which would be an institutionalized and for the material management side of it, and then the MDSS side of it as well. Here's a snapshot. Unfortunately, like we were saying, we couldn't bring a snowplow here. It's quite a distance to do that. In addition, what we have is a fairly old fleet. 2009 is basically one of our newest snowplows out there. So what we have here in the bottom picture on that, you can see is the onboard unit. It's roughly about 18 by 24 inches. That's our modular architecture where we have that capability to switch between the three modes, and it fits behind the passenger seat in the snowplow. The sensor packages on the external side are fitted up on the mirrors, and then we had to bypass the OBD side of it because most of our fleet's so old, the proprietary nature and stuff, we couldn't access that. So we still get the wiper status and the spreader rate. That one picture up there shows a frequency that does the conveyor belts, so it shows what material, how much is being dispensed and at the rate it's being dispensed as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Michigan DOT's framework. There's very similar to us, you know, the lessons learned and everything over the last three phases of this as well. And what most benefited them is getting down into the microclimate level so that they can get, you know, do the ground truth and get what that road weather temperature really is and then what's happening at those climates within that road temperature. That was their biggest benefit. You can see that they have a very similar nature in their framework with their system. They also, you know, take in the mobile data, also their road weather sites within this. They also transmit over their server, which is called the DUOP, which is their central server. And it pushes this data as well out to the USDOT's weather data environment and the NCAR's vehicle data translator server as well. So some of the benefits for them, more than anything, probably is given their maintenance decision support system. They have a touchscreen GUI into all of their vehicles. That way they can provide solutions to their drivers as they're out there on their plow routes and everything to be able to manage the material that's being dispensed. And they can keep track of that too as to how much salt and chemicals that they're actually being dispensed out there. They have better resource management by being able to use this system in there, so it's very beneficial to them. Their onboard unit's very similar to the one that I just showed you in ours. It's about the size of a laptop. It also fits behind the passenger seat of their snowplows. So it's very beneficial to them, like I was saying. Then they also transmit the data very similar. They have the DSRC, the Wi-Fi and cellular capabilities as well. And their DUOP, like I was saying earlier, it's data use analysis and processing. That's the term for their DUOP server. They also collect the information from the National Weather Service and their private vendor as well. Same as NDOT, we do the same thing, and same as Minnesota. They push this information to their TOCs, and they can use motorist advisory warnings and everything, which is very beneficial to them. Here's some snapshots of some of the images taken from their snowplows. They found this very beneficial too. This gives them actual real-time And that way the public knows what routes are being plowed, where they're at, and the location of those routes as well. And then with that, you get the motorist advisory warnings and what they're posting on those DMS signs and so forth. Here's some examples of those motorist advisory warnings and some of the alerts that are being posted. These also incorporated a active traffic management strategy, which is the variable speed limit systems. You can see that over there. That way, when they're out there getting that microclimate, they know what's really happening down at the road level. And then they can reduce those speeds and then provide better safety to the traveling public. Some other states that are doing this, Oregon, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, we just implemented our first variable speed limit system. And I heard you guys talking about that earlier. It's based on high winds and high-profile vehicles in those scenarios. This is the Michigan DOT's MyDrive webpage. There's a little snapshot of that showing that on the legend over there you can toggle on or off various road conditions, speed conditions. They also, one of their benefits was to include their snow plows with the imagery and everything. That way the public can also see what is actually happening out there on the road at that time. Okay, the next one I'm going to go through is Minnesota DOT system framework. This one is a little bit more on the maintenance decision support system. These guys are the same as Michigan. They're fully institutionalized, so they have a very comprehensive system. They can get unique forecast for all of their 810 Minnesota DOT snow plow routes. They have 590 of their units fitted with AVL. And some of the best things with those guys is the same thing. They can get that information out to their drivers for maintenance decision support, for what material needs to be dispensed and that kind of thing to make good, smart decisions. They have cameras installed on 240 of their snow plows. That way the public can see these images. It's internal and external. Internally, they like to use that so that they can make decisions whether they need to close a road or resource planning. And then externally, of course, is provide that information to the traveling public over their 511 system. Additionally, they implemented 43 of their motor tractors with AVL. The reason they did this, they kind of wanted to keep track of areas that they were out there mowing. In addition to that, they could use live maps and everything else to see if there's any areas of, say, noxious weeds and stuff like that for abatement treatments and stuff like that. The other, they are working with their light-duty vehicles as well. With the OBD, they're still in the process of getting that fully institutionalized. This is their framework, very similar to Michigan's and Nevada DOT's. It's a comprehensive system that they have 8 servers. They can scale up to 9 if needed. That push the data the same as us. They put it out to the weather data environment, the MADIS, NCAR, also out to the traveling public. They take input from road weather sites as well, and same as most all of us too with their mobile data and everything. The AVL capabilities with this and their cellular connections with the DSRC.
Welcome to Belle Isle. This your first time in Detroit? Okay, great. So what I would like to show you is how would you like it if your car or mobile phone could tell you when you're going to reach adverse weather events like slippery conditions, heavy snow, black ice, even potholes. Wouldn't that be great if your vehicle could do that? I'm going to show you how we can do that for you in this vehicle. So traditionally today what you get is the 70-degree temperature on your monitor. Oh, that's great. It's 70 degrees, but what if I'm traveling out of state or I'm going up north, and you all know in Michigan that your weather can change like that. You want to know when it's going to change, how much it's going to change. When am I going to hit that black ice? I want to avoid it. I don't even want to try to go through it. With all of the recent flooding, you want to know to get away from that flooding. This vehicle has sensors equipped in it that can do that for you. These sensors, and I've just put them up on the screen, that's what's equipped in this vehicle right now. It's a lot to look at. You will not have to see this if it's in your vehicle. Just know that your vehicle is collecting all this information. In the top row, you have your GPS location, which is pretty standard these days. You have your velocity and your roughness, and I'll tell you why we're recording your roughness. your
No
events.
alerts at this time.
It's keeping your brakes. It's going to track when you're using your brakes and your wiper status. It's also tracking the temperature, your air, and the surface temperature, the temperature of the road, and we know that's extremely important. Your humidity and your dew point. That's great, but what does all this do for the motorist? It gives you an alert, like you can see on the screen. We currently don't have any alerts at this time. Everything is safe and smooth sailing. We're good to go. But what you would see on the freeway, even when you didn't have an alert, is this electronic sign over here. This is your traditional way to tell the motorist what's going on in front of you. But usually they're telling you when an exit is closed, and that's great, how many lanes are closed, but it's not going to tell you this.
Wet roads. Use caution.
Exactly. So now the driver can prepare himself to use caution. Back to the instrumentation. If you can see as we go through this rain event, you've got your wipers highlighted and your brakes, and that will have a direct result of what the warnings are that the vehicle behind us get. We have now been able to grab our information from us experiencing the event and give it to the motorist behind us, and it gives us that exact same alert screen that we saw previously. So it's like a giving and a receiving relationship. The more vehicles that are connected, the more reliable the information will be. Another thing that this vehicle is tracking is this roughness. Why do we need to track roughness? Why are we measuring it? Well, in the lower numbers right now, you've got smooth sailing. You can feel it. That's what a pothole feels like. You see that number go up? That's why we're tracking it. You can tell maintenance when you have potholes and where they are at. They can go and fix them right away. Operations will know exactly the location. You can also see if you've got compacted snow. I don't want to drive through compacted snow. I would avoid the area altogether. Back to our alert screen again. This is all you will see. Don't be afraid of all those other numbers and acronyms. What you're going to see is this alert screen. We don't have any at this time because the other vehicle,
ahead.
We have an alert.
Drive slowly and use caution.
The other vehicle must have experienced some type of condition to give us this alert. We need to brace ourselves. Try and watch what information we're going to pick up as we experience these slippery conditions. You'll see what we're grabbing by the highlight. Brakes, anti-lock brakes, and traction control. Since we've had to experience that, our vehicle has gathered that information, the direct correlation between the brakes being applied, the traction control, and the anti-lock brakes will produce an alert for the other motorists that we have slippery conditions. You have the temperature. Right now it's 76, so we know it's just slippery. We also know that if it was minus 20, we know that it's black ice. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you, everyone.
Basically what this one did is it kind of shows some of their data caption, what they can do with this, and it's very good what they can do with the vehicle data translator, showing the capabilities of this, providing that information to the public and so forth. The other thing, they can go out there and provide information on the ride, the surface, and the friction and stuff like that with the pavements out there. So, like I was just talking about some of the benefits in that video, so we missed that part of it, but there's some high benefits. And all three of us states what we did is the idea was to fill in the gaps. You have your road weather information sites. They're remotely placed at your mountaintops and this kind of thing, but you can't get that continuous coverage of the roads. And that's what IMO is going to do for you. It's going to fill in those gaps and get that continuous coverage in real time. It also spurs other developments for new applications. It can enhance your existing systems. Like I was saying, the MDSS with these guys in the MMS, you can keep track of what is being dispensed and then be a little bit more smart in your strategies and reduce some of those. That's an environmental impact, so it's very good on that side of it. Your maintenance resourcing, it's good for you guys to do that and keep track when you can get them out there sooner than later. Actionable, automated alerts and messages from your TOCs to your maintenance personnel. It's very timely and valuable information. And ultimately, like we're trying to do here, is everybody's trying to be very efficient, effective, and accountable. So if you guys have any questions or anything about IMO, especially on the cost side of it, we did a cost comparison from the Nevada DOT side. We have all three platforms that we work through. We're still evaluating that. We found that, the DSRC, just to give you guys a heads up, for each onboard unit's approximately $4,500 to implement, something like that. and then each DSRC unit on the roadside element. What you want to do, and what we did purposefully, is we spread those out. We have a 32-mile section where we did our roadside units, and within that we have 18 sites that we implemented with where we had ITS infrastructure. So everything's on the fiber backbone, which really helped us there. But we wanted to make sure as we did this, we spaced them out that we can do the handshake between the cellular and the DSRC, and just to see proof of concept, and it does work. So Wyoming, like we were talking about here, they're doing their connected vehicle pilot corridor. Now that's a long corridor. They're not going to be able to space, every mile and a half. It gets very expensive. On the roadside, we spent approximately $5,000 at the contractor price to install those. And then on the data integration side, you're going to have some costs there. So we spent roughly a little over $100-some thousand to get that integration into our data, for that message sets to make sure we're compliant. And then you got your ongoing reoccurring costs too. So those start to add up after a while, depending on the platform that you want to use and how densely you want to populate your roadside units and so forth. So other than that, we got some additional questions and some discussions. What vehicle-based capabilities, AVL and so forth? For the most part, most of them did, didn't they? Yeah, a few of you have the AVL. Most all of you do, it sounded like, has the AVL already, right?
We don't have AVL, but we download it when we hit the Wi-Fi at the lot, which gives us spread information, vehicle information, not weather information, but vehicle material management.
And we talked about that too, as far as the management strategies and stuff like that. Is there any that you see that can benefit your guys' departments moving forward? Yeah, IMO is probably, kind of an institutional thing too. You can get it to the side like where we're at. We take it all the way up to the assessment stage. Now it's taking it to the institutional side. That's usually a department thing. Is the department willing to take it forward into an MDSS, MMS side? So that's where it gets a little bit more expensive. Fitting and going through proof of concept, getting the data and everything is really the technology side, and then now getting it to the institutional side. That's some of the barriers that we have within our own department. So
I'm going to wrap it up very quickly. Although I was going to say we didn't start until about 8:15. So so I'm going to wrap up very quickly. As I said, we have several members of the innovation Weather Savvy Roads Innovation Deployment Team from FHWA, the National Weather Service, and the state DOTs. And again, as part of the EDC4 initiative, we're going to be determining at what stage you are in terms of implementing both the the Pathfinder and the IMO. These are just, again, to summarize what the Pathfinder is, the goal. And then we already have those implementation stages defined. So if you can pass this around for both the Pathfinder and the IMO. We've actually developed the implementation, the description of the implementation stages. So our plan, starting 2017, once we have developed the implementation plan for the Weather Savvy Roads, we're going to be taking in the information that we get from all the summits, including this one. So we're going to be developing several materials pertaining to, and promoting several materials pertaining to the Pathfinder and the IMO solutions. And we're going to be embarking on a variety of technology, knowledge and technology transfer activities, and hopefully you can participate in some of those technology transfer activities. So stay tuned. And I hope that you decide to implement either one of those two solutions, or maybe both. So this is just the different sources or funding that you can use. For the Pathfinder, you don't need a lot of resources really to implement Pathfinder. For the IMO, the integrated mobile solutions, that's where you're probably going to need a lot more resources in terms of procurement of the different sensors. So again, the Weather Savvy Roads Initiative, it involves not just the maintenance and traffic operations part of your agency, it also involves the information technology group. And hopefully you can choose one or both of the solutions that we have described today. So thank you very much. This is the different, if you need more information, please contact any of these individuals. And again, most of this information will be posted on the EDC4 website. Thank you, and I apologize for, for running out of time.